All right, welcome to The Explainer. So today we are diving into a really fascinating speech from 1975, and it makes a huge claim that there's one single universal formula for finding true love, happiness, and peace. I mean, that's a bold claim, right? So let's unpack how it even tries to build that argument. So, the speech kicks off by tapping into something we can all relate to, right? That deep human desire, that search for something real, something eternal and unchanging, in a world that, let's be honest, can feel pretty chaotic and untrustworthy. It starts by asking this one big question. All right, so here's the thing. Instead of making us wait for some big reveal at the end, this speech just lays its cards right on the table right at the start. So what is the answer it gives to that massive question? And there it is, living for the sake of others. This is the absolute core of the whole thing. And the speech argues that, hey, this isn't just some nice feel-good idea or a moral suggestion. Nope. It claims this is the fundamental, unchanging law that the entire universe is built on. I know, it's a huge concept, so let's really dig in. So, to back this up, to really make the case for this idea, the speech does something interesting. It doesn't start with us, with people. It goes all the way to the top. It builds a logical case starting with the concept of God to try and prove that this is a universal law. Okay, so the logic goes like this. Things like love, happiness, all those ideals we chase, you can't achieve them alone, right? They're not solitary things. You need someone else, a reciprocal relationship, for them to even exist. And the speech argues that this is so fundamental that even an absolute being, even God, would need what it calls an object partner to experience any of it. And this is where the theology gets really unique. The speech says that we, humanity, were created to be that partner. But get this, it's not just about being a partner. It's about being a partner who's meant to be even more precious, more valuable than the creator. You know, just like how loving parents look at their kids and think, you are more important than I am. So this is the linchpin of the whole argument. The creator himself, by existing for the sake of his creation, set the ultimate precedent. The speech argues that if it were the other way around, if creation existed for God's sake, the whole system would be built on division. But because the standard is living for others, that's what makes unity even possible. Okay, so how does this big theological idea actually apply to our lives, down here on Earth? Well, the speech takes this principle and basically turns it into a practical, universal formula for, well, everything, from our personal relationships all the way up to global politics. And the speech doesn't pull any punches. It frames the choice in these really stark black and white terms. You've got two paths. Path one, living for yourself. The speech says that road always leads to division and eventually decline. Path two, living for others. And that's presented as the only way to get to prosperity, to unity, to the ideal world we're all hoping for. And check this out. This is a brilliant illustration of how this formula is supposed to work. It's like a ripple effect. It's not just a one-off thing you do. It starts small in the closest relationships, a husband for his wife. And then it just expands outward in these ever-widening circles, each level living for the sake of the one bigger than it. And to make this idea less abstract, the speech gives us some real-world examples, or at least archetypes. A true parent. They live for their kids. A true patriot. They live for their nation. And the greatest of all saints, they live for all of humanity, even their enemies. And it doesn't stop there. This formula gets applied to the whole world stage, to geopolitics. Now remember, this speech was given in 1975, right in the thick of the Cold War. And it basically says that any nation, any ideology that's only looking out for number one, and it calls out both the Soviet Union and America for doing this, is setting itself up to decline and ultimately fail. All right, so we've had the theory. Now the speech pivots to show this principle in action. And it does this with a really fascinating personal story. A real-world test case, you could say. And it all goes down during this super high-stakes diplomatic fight at the United Nations. So here's the scene. The year is 1974. The situation for South Korea at the UN, it's looking bleak. I mean, really dire. They're about to lose a critical vote to a North Korean proposal, and pretty much every expert, every ambassador on the scene is saying, yeah, it's a lost cause. It's hopeless. So a group of 68 missionaries are sent to the UN, and the instruction they get is, well, it's not what you'd expect. They're not told to be master debaters or slick political lobbyists. No. Their entire mission was just to go and live out this core principle. living for others with the ambassadors. And what's so wild about this is how they went about it. Look at these actions. They are so practical, so humble. This wasn't about scoring political points or winning arguments. It was all about trying to move people's hearts through genuine, selfless service. We're talking everything from deep, sincere counseling to literally just flagging down a taxi for an ambassador at 2 in the morning. And the result? Against all odds, a total surprise, a decisive victory for the South Korean proposal. And the speech frames this as something way beyond just a political win. It calls it an unimaginable miracle, a miracle that happened, it claims, because of the power of this one simple principle. So after all this, the theology, the geopolitics, the UN story, the speech brings this huge cosmic idea down to a final, personal litmus test for every single one of us. And it's surprisingly simple. It basically proposes a spiritual calculation. At the end of your life, did you live more for others than you did for yourself? Even just 1% more. That's the test. And this leads to the ultimate paradox of the whole speech. It's this idea that by living completely for others, by giving everything away step by step, to your family, your nation, the world, and finally to God, you somehow, in the end, get it all back. You inherit everything. And really, that's the challenge that this speech from 1975 leaves ringing in our ears. It asks us to completely rethink what we mean by value, what we mean by success, even what we mean by salvation. It's all wrapped up in this one single, really demanding idea. What would it mean if the true measure of a life was just how much of it you gave away? A lot to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.